Okay, so good afternoon to you all. It's a great pleasure to be here in this prestigious institution. I'm having a great time in Brazil. Yesterday we even had a Brazilian steak, even though I am an Argentinian. It wasn't that bad, I must say. That's the most I can say, I have to be careful. So, when I was told by Sergio that Bob Robert was coming as well, and whether I was ready to sit at the same table, I said, sure. We have done that in the past in other forums at the OECD. There is one problem, is that we tend to agree, so that makes it more boring for you. So I will try to skip over the parts that we agree most and focus on some complementary aspects. But again, I warn you that, can I have the, yeah. I warn you that in many aspects of this topic, we tend to agree. So, we are indeed facing what I would call a tidal way of innovation. So now what happens with the innovations, particularly at this time, is that there are so many things happen at the same time that people get confused. So they say, wait, what were you talking about? The internet, the Amazon, the Facebook? Are we talking about artificial intelligence? What's that? It sounds like something very esoteric, the cloud. I don't know what. I mean, people by and large cannot now these days sense, what's going on, because technological change and innovation is happening, in a sense, in a remote place which we cannot see. What you see is really only a very tiny, the end of a huge amount of innovation, if you wish, in the back office. You see, when you see this and you try to understand what's behind this, it's mind-boggling. You can't. So for you, okay, this is a screen. This is the most important organ in our body, okay? Because you manage with this, okay? And that's it, okay? And the kid can do it, I can do it, you can do it, and you don't really grasp, okay, the tremendous amount of innovation and science and technology that is in the background. But I think that many people claim, and I tend to agree, that perhaps the most important development is in machine learning. I mean, the part of artificial intelligence has to do with machine learning. I won't go into the definitions. I may mention this and that. And as Robert was saying, there are many claims that this time is different and so forth. I don't want to get into that. I tend to agree with Bob that, there is this famous saying in Ecclesiastes in the Bible, that everything that has been will be, and there is nothing new under the sun. Okay? I'm not sure whether that's true, but in this context, I agree with that, and I particularly strongly disagree with the pessimists, like Bob Gordon. That. And what infuriates me about the pessimists is that there is such a long history of being wrong. The Malthusian guys, and the economics was called the dismal science, because if you were a good economist, you will make a prediction that things are going to go wrong, and like a broken clock, twice a day you are right? But that doesn't prove anything. So I'm not going to relate to that. The first question to ask is this artificial intelligence, machine learning, is this a general purpose technology? Is it something truly big? Can it become something big? Before we ask the question of whether it's going to displace all 90% of the jobs, okay? But in fact, what I want to focus is not on trying to make prophecies. That's not my business. Reading the crystal ball is an occupation that has a lot of occupational hazard. So I don't going to engage in it, but rather ask the question about the role of policy. is it different in the political economy sense of it? What can we do? What should we do as a society in front of what we know today, not of what may happen in a distant future? That's what preoccupies me, okay? Now, a few words about the GPTs, general purpose technologies. I mean, I don't want to elaborate on that. It's more of a technicality, but I want you to understand that we are talking about big things, you know, the steam engine, electricity, semiconductors. These, when we look back in history, these were technologies that really changed the economy in a big way over a long time, as Bob was saying. And what are the characteristics of these technologies? First of all, that they are pervasive, that have widespread use, okay? The steam engine came to power essentially all of industry, eventually, you know, it took time, okay? And transportation, you know, the steamboats and railroads and even steam-driven cars, which is at least known a part of the history of cars. That's pervasive, okay? It touched everything. And of course, steam engines also generated electricity, okay? So that's pervasive, okay? So that's the first characteristic. Is it pervasive? Can it be pervasive, okay? The second one is that it has to have the potential for keep improving, okay? Because if the steam engine would have stayed the same way that, you know, Bolton and Watt created it, it wouldn't have made any difference. But it kept improving over time, okay, over the whole history of the computer engine. And the third thing is that when you had to adopt a steam engine or electricity or whatever, it's not that you just took it, put it in place, and replace whatever you were doing before exactly the same way. No, that doesn't make a difference. What makes a difference is when the adoption of the GPT, the general purpose technology, of the steam engine, of electricity, changes the way you do things. Then it becomes revolutionary. Then it really affects productivity in a widespread manner, okay? So the question we should have is artificial intelligence, machine learning, potentially, because we are at the beginning of it, okay, a GPT. And, you know, I won't go through the details, but concerning the wide range of applications, yes, there is a huge amount of potential applications for AI and machine learning that makes us think that indeed it may become a general purpose technology as significant as electricity, as the steam engine, as semiconductors, okay? And here you have some, I like the automated theorem proving as a potential thing. You know, those of us that study also mathematics will be very disappointed if a machine, you know, proves a theorem better than you do. And then there is sentiment analysis, opinion mining also, okay, which is interesting. Anyway, so there is pervasiveness, there is the potential for improvement, and this is interesting. You know, the very nature of machine learning is that it can keep improving itself. Actually, the most promising aspect of machine learning is what's called unsupervised machine learning. Okay, the machine, it's a very sophisticated thing. You know, the machine, as you expose it to more and more data, keeps discerning patterns by itself that you were not able to discern as a human being, and that the machine itself was not able to discern, you know, when it was exposed to, say, half the data that was exposed previously. So the potential for improvement is in the very nature of this technology. And, you know, of course, innovation and complementarity, yes, you know, we can create autonomous vehicles and so forth and so on. So clearly, okay, we are talking about an incipient GPT, a GPT in the making. We are not yet there, okay? But it has the potential to become a revolutionary GPT as much as a steam engine. I don't know whether more than that. I don't think it's going to change the world, in the fundamental way, as Bob was saying, but it won't be less than the steam engine or electricity. Now, in my point of view, one of the differences that make this perhaps different than in the past is the political economy implications. And why is that? Well, any GPT brings about, by definition, disruption. Okay, there are winners and there are losers. And yes, the economy grows, the size of the pie grows, but in the process, some lose and don't gain. Okay, and I made up this phrase. There is the famous what Newton said, that we, meaning the scientists of the time, we look further, we see further because we are standing on the shoulders of giants, meaning the previous scientists. It's a very famous phrase by Newton. Okay. Now, what I said is, yes, we enjoy today higher standards of living because we are standing on the broken backs of those that paved the way for technological progress but did not live to benefit from it. I'm thinking of the Industrial Revolution. I'm thinking of the Dickensian, what Dickens described as the conditions of the workers throughout the 19th century and throughout part of the 20th century as well. Okay? These small conditions for workers, yes, made us, the descendants, much richer, benefited us, but they didn't live to benefit from it. You can say, well, this is the way history evolved. Too bad. Well, you would expect that in the 21st century, we would have developed policy tools to ameliorate the inevitable bad effects of technological disruption on the losers. We have much more extensive safety nets now than we had even 50 years ago. Yes, we have some version of a welfare state, but given what we believe in the 21st century, these safety nets, in my opinion, cannot handle in a good way large flows of technologically displaced workers and together with longer life expectancies. And this is something which is unique to our time. Because essentially, if you think of it, take for a moment aside technological disruption and the fact that workers get displaced. Okay, suppose that doesn't happen. Okay, in any case, we have an issue with people living longer because the dependency ratio, the number of people working in working age, supporting a growing population of older people. That has created a problem in every single country. Pension funds are underfunded and so forth and so on. We have a problem. The US has a problem, England has a problem, Brazil has a problem, Israel has a problem. Okay? But if you, on top of that, have a new wave of a big GPT, okay, creating momentary, okay, but that momentary may be 10 years or 20 years, displacement of one type of workers, that, yes, there are going to be other new jobs created. I agree completely with you, both because of the demand effect and because new occupations pop up. How many people are working these days in designing internet sites? It's an occupation that didn't exist at all. Okay, yes, you have that, but they're not the same people. The drivers of the school buses or of trucks, okay, that are going to be displaced, are not going to be retrained to design internet sites. Okay, so they will probably become early retirees. And they will add to the fact that, as I said, there is aging. The current welfare state, okay, cannot handle that well. That's a fact, okay? So what do we do about it? On top of that, at least in democracies, And I hope that everybody here believes that, as Churchill said, democracy is the worst of political systems except for all the rest. Okay? And I strongly believe in that. So there is, in this time and age, there is what we call a democratization of expectations. Meaning by that, it's much harder these days to have any sort of development that will have losers and winners, and that's it. And the losers, it's your problem, and the winners, go and enjoy it, okay? And that's part of the spread of democracy, is causing that more people, okay, are less ready to put up with disruptions that will affect them personally, and they are not going to be swayed by saying, well, be happy and relax because the size of the pie is increasing. No, that's not a good enough answer. And we are more impatient, more demanding of governments. We expect more from governments. Not long ago, if a natural disaster happened, it was your problem. Nowadays, the government not only has to respond, but should have anticipated it. And it's good that it's like that. It's good that we're more impatient. We are more intolerant of failure, okay? So that's part of the reality we live, at least in democracies. And I said, I hope we keep living in democracies. But it's even more complicated than that, because, the cost of disruption is not just for the individual. When there is some sort of correlation between being a loser or a winner, okay, and the political divide, okay, then it becomes very dangerous. And without getting into it, I will say that what happened in the last election in the US is some indication of that, when those that see themselves as having been left behind by developments, be it globalization or blah, blah, technological change and so forth, okay, they align themselves politically as a group in a certain direction, okay, that can create tensions that are very dangerous for the very nature of democracy, okay? And as I said before, we cannot afford to have large chunks of the population that are either underemployed, unemployed, etc., living longer, okay, because that creates a big burden on the economy. So what's kind of the corollary, okay, of all that? That governments, in my view, will have to take a wider responsibility for the transitions. If in the past, something happened, and then, okay, there was a transition period, winners and losers, then, we act reactively and tried somehow exposed to ameliorate the bad effects of these changes. No, now we will demand from governments to be more active, more assertive. I agree completely with you, Bob, that it's the last thing we want to do is to slow down technological change. Whenever I hear that, I mean, it's not going to happen. Whatever, because technology, runs not by itself, but the governments can maybe do a little bit of harm, but not stop it. Okay. But in any case, it's not a matter of slowing down, but on the contrary, making sure that more people in society can participate, can benefit, can be less of losers and more of winners. Okay, so it's a matter of inclusion and not of exclusion. That's what we need. So I want to consider three sets of policies in three contexts. One is education, second in personal services, and third in the direction of technological change. So in terms of education, the Industrial Revolution or revolutions, okay, that happened since the late 18th century onwards, particularly during the 19th century, were accompanied by a revolution in education. They went hand in hand, okay? One fed the other, okay? But ever since, essentially, we have a model of education that has been called, rightly or wrongly, the factory model of education, because it was patterned, it was shaped on the same ideas that govern the factories in the Industrial Revolution. So very hierarchical systems, very structured, very uniform, because, same curriculum, even in, I don't know in Brazil, but when I grew up in Argentina, we went to school with a uniform. We wore a uniform. It was a white, all white in the primary school, and then, there was a dress code, very strict in secondary school, uniformity, okay? You wanted to create these automatons that were ready for the workforce on the one hand, and to become loyal citizens of your country. Okay, that's it. Okay, and what we did over time is we did more of the same. We added more courses, more material, more hours, more years of schooling, and on both ends. Okay, so primary school was not enough. Secondary school is not enough. You need college. All right. On the other hand, at the beginning, so 6 years old, no, you start at 5 years old, compulsory school, 4 years old, 3 years old, okay? So we expanded it, but it essentially remained the same model, the factory model of education, more of the same. What we need is a new revolution in education for the 21st century that will go hand in hand with the expected new GPT and the demands and the requirements for this new incipient technology. So we have to step away from this obsession with imparting knowledge. It's ridiculous to impart knowledge when most of the knowledge of humanity is accessible here. And that's not an exaggeration, okay? So, why should I spend years and years, okay, in trying to make you memorize maybe, a tiny part of what's in here when you can access it directly? What we need then, and certainly uniformity, is also that should be passé, because a basic law of nature is that each individual is different. And in the same way that we look different, okay, each of us, our personalities, inclinations, capabilities, abilities, aspirations are different, and it cannot be in the 21st century that one size fits all. It doesn't fit. And we are trying to compress everybody into the same mold. And by doing that, we are really avoiding taking advantage of the potential of each individual, okay? And we need skills relevant for the AI economy. So let me talk a bit about skills. I looked at the three sources, that you can find it easily. What are considered to be the 10 most important skills for employment? The first is from the UNICEF. The others are from 2 commercial sites that do this all the time. Now, look at it, okay? They are completely different from what schools do, okay? Some schools may do some of these, but, we don't do it, and certainly not in academia. Just, let me underline some. Call type 1 skills, creative, decision-making, adaptive. Look at the problem-solving, critical thinking, decision-making, creative thinking, etc., okay? Type 2, interpersonal communication, effective communication, interpersonal relation, interpersonal ability, social intelligence, virtual collaboration. These are the skills that are required now, not in 10 years or 20 years' time by most employment. And then there is the type 3, emotional self-confidence. Yes. Okay. So these are the types. So what do we need? First of all, we need to invert the pyramid. I talked about this morning in a panel with the with Fernando Haddad, very interesting. We need to invest much more in early age education. Why? Because it's at that early stage that the basis for developing these skills is established. And if you don't do it right at that early stage, it's much harder to do it afterwards. We need to promote experimentation. Okay, we can't have government uniform mandated uniformity. We need to do more research on that, of course. Let me go quickly through the other issues. The fastest growing occupations, according to the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics in the US, in the next 10 years are going to be in what's called personal care, healthcare, social assistance, and yes, education, nursing, etc. Now, very many of these jobs are low pay, low training, low status, low technology, okay? But again, most of the growth will happen there. So what we need is to professionalize these occupations. We need to set training and academic standards, and we need to expose them at school when they study to become teachers, to become daycare personnel, etc., etc. We need to expose them to advanced technologies, because then, okay, they will be able to improve, okay, and to develop what we call smart human artificial intelligence machine interfaces. There is an example, I won't have time to go to it. And lastly, the issue of the direction of technical change. This is something that economists are very reluctant to talk about, because they say, well, you know, we understand the incentives to do more or less R&D, okay, or innovation. But the direction of technical change is something which is, you know, decided by the entrepreneurs themselves. We don't have anything to say about it. Whatever happens, happens. I don't agree. We can, in a smart way, influence also the direction of technical change, because essentially there are two possibilities. One is what we call human enhancing innovations, and you refer to that, Bob, I think, okay, which is those innovations that magnify and enhance human capabilities. The great examples are in medicine, but also in education. Because if you deploy artificial intelligence to track individual progress of students, you become a much better teacher. It's not that the machine will replace you, okay, but will allow you to do better, okay? Now, there are also human replacing innovations, okay? Like, you know, I always say, you know, the whole system that was developed by Walmart, okay, it's not a coincidence. Walmart is one of the largest, if not the largest employer in the world, I think, you know, not far from there. And most of Walmart workers are low pay, low qualifications, etc., etc., okay? I don't think that we need to encourage that. We cannot stop that. We are not going to stop that, okay? But we don't need to encourage that. And so what I want to say is that governments could affect the direction of technical change, and whenever possible, encourage human enhancing innovations and not human replacing innovations. And the concluding remarks. You know, I think we are at the verge of a big change. But if this time is different, it's because of what I said. We have less patience. You know, we want governments to be more active in anticipating the required changes in policy, like in education. We don't need to wait to see another generation of displaced workers that are unable to rejoin the workforce. We need to take steps now in order to counter that. And a last comment about Brazil. I was stunned this morning, I must confess my ignorance, when Fernando Haddad mentioned the fact that the rate of high school completion in Brazil is still very low. And so is the rate at which people, youngsters go to higher education, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, I really wasn't aware of that. I thought I was more or less like Argentina or Uruguay and so forth, and it's just not the case. So there is a lot of catching up to do. And in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, sitting here and talking about this futuristic world will seem like an anomaly. What are you talking about? We still need to catch up, from well behind. Well, true. But a country doesn't need to go the same way, 20 years later or 30 years later than other countries did in the past. You don't need to retrace the same route. New technologies can allow you to leapfrog. New technologies can allow you to provide these days directly the set of skills that they are required for the 21st century, and not to catch up providing the knowledge and the skills that were required in the second half of the 20th century. And what I want to encourage you to think hard about that, to look into the new possibilities open by machine learning and AI, and not say, well, how can, this is not in our country because this is far-fetched. This is maybe good for the US or for Israel, okay, but not for us. No, on the contrary, because it may be even more important for a country that may obviate, okay, some of the way that other countries had to go through, okay? And the last point is we need policies that will perhaps avoid falling into the trap of creating new inequities in society that typically was the case in the past, when some technology benefited very narrow groups, okay, at the expense of others. This is something that, in my view, an institution like this one, this think tank, should put your minds, if I may suggest something, is that, into this set of issues. We, coming from abroad, cannot give advice of what to do in the sense of the policies themselves. But we can tell you that we have high expectations of you doing the job of thinking about these issues. Thank you very much.